But when I point to things with AI, I like to point to things like these because I also think that we can use AI to elevate, to enhance our thinking, but not if we use it as a production tool. We have to use it specifically as a learning tool, and I think if it's used correctly, it's very good at that. But it oftentimes is not used in that way. It's used as a production tool, enabled to give you better grades or whatever.
Thomas Telving, thank you very much for being here for the Future of Learning podcast. An author known for his in-depth lectures on AI and 20 years of experience as a communication manager, press manager, editor, journalist, and other things. You've been featured in Danish television, a DR program on AI. Besides numerous articles and interviews, you are the author of Dear Mille, Killing Sophia, and, as luck would have it, you're releasing a new book that, according to what I could find on the website, is getting released tomorrow, the 14th of January. And the title of that is, translated from the Danish, I took to be 10 Things You Must Know About Philosophy and AI. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much.
So I want to jump right in with a question because I think this is something that comes up quite a bit when it comes to education, learning, school systems, and so on. And maybe this is related to something I think you've referred to before as cognitive offloading. I see posts online, particularly in LinkedIn, arguing that AI is like a calculator, that children just kind of need to prepare for a world with AI everywhere. And, shouldn't they just get access to AI and just use it, just like, any other tool, a ruler or a pen or something. I've been confronted with that several times before. When I started talking about AI and learning, I've been talking about AI for many years, but AI and learning I started talking particularly about when ChatGPT came out. And rather quickly after I mentioned that this would cause problems for the educational world, a couple of teachers, high school teachers, came out and said, yeah, right, but people like you were also afraid that it would be the end of the world when the calculator came out, and look what happened. Assuming sort of that nothing happened, which I see as a complete mistake, because a lot of things happened when the calculator came out. One thing was that we stopped using our brains for smaller calculations, so we're not able to calculate very much in our heads anymore because we use a calculator. That's an example of cognitive offloading. And there's nothing wrong with that, and there's nothing wrong with cognitive offloading. But there's something wrong with thinking that technology does not shape the way we think, because it does. So a calculator does it in one way. How does large language models, generative AI, change it? That's a different question, but it's a question that we can learn something about from previous technology having, changed our way of thinking. So you're, in a sense, phrasing it as a way to kind of go upstream on the question, not making specific policy recommendations per se, but being able to get some clarity on what it is we're talking about, in essence.
Well, at least that's a place to start, because when people come out and say that take it easy, this is not a big deal, we've had technology before, I said yes, we had, and that's fine, but we should be aware that technology shapes the way we think. So okay, if a calculator makes you affects your skills in calculation, and a GPS affects your skills in finding your way around, what if we get a technology that does not only calculate for you, that does not only find your way around, but that sort of thinks for you? How does that affect you? And I'm not saying that then we are not able to think when we use ChatGPT, but if we take it in a school context, which is very, very common, and use it for writing, then it would be naive to think that if we use a machine for writing, that we will still be able to write. I mean, I'm not saying that we are going to lose that ability completely, because you have to write in order to make a prompt, but the practice of writing, the hard practice, the hard work of learning how to express what you think in language, in written language, that's a skill that takes a lot of practice. So if you offload that practice to ChatGPT or Gemini, whatever they're called, and make them do that hard work for you, and then you read it and think, yeah, that's more or less what I thought, well, then you lost something in that process. So the question is, what is it that we are losing? Are we losing something valuable? And I think we are. We can get back to that, but I think we need to start there, because I'm out on high schools and public schools and all over talking about these things. And one thing that strikes me is that people are not. They don't seem to be aware of this very basic, pretty logical thing, that what you do not practice, you do not become better at. So that's a place to start. There's a lot more to say about it, but that's an important thing to just have in place.
Yeah, maybe we will circle back on that again a little bit later. I think it's a super what do you call it, apropos question right now with the schools and how they tackle it. I have a 15-year-old, and that's been a topic almost every day. So the new book. Should we jump right into that?
Sure.
New book,
yeah.
The one that's called 10 Things You Must Know About Philosophy and AI. So first, let me ask you, what made you write this book? You already have a couple of books out.
Yeah, that's. I'm glad you asked. Well, I've been writing about AI for many years, and my entrance point was philosophy, the philosophy of mind, what goes on inside a computer, because people started thinking that these machines were like sentient or conscious, had a consciousness. So that's a very philosophical question. And also, when you make a large language model, like these big general models that are supposed to answer everything, what you do is actually that you try to simulate a human being. So if you want to simulate a human being, you'd better simulate a good human being. But what is a good human being? Well, that's a philosophical question too. And when you start looking at it that way, it turns out that there's just a string of philosophical questions that are being activated in a very real way by artificial intelligence, by technology, but by artificial intelligence and robotics in particular. So that got me into it, and I've been writing about it, like I said, for many years. And I could see that, okay, there's a lot of themes here. I would like to make like a more systematic walkthrough of these issues that it rises within philosophy. So I did that, and I took out 10 points and said, okay, I want to dig into all these, and I had dug into them earlier in various ways, but do it in a more structured manner. And then I got in contact with a publisher, and it's a publisher aimed at high school students. So this is actually teaching materials for high school. So that's the aim of this book in particular. I like to say that I think that everybody with an internet connection will have a better and easier life having read this book. But the purpose for me was actually to start with the kids and say, you need to know this.
I kind of dragged out a few points from that book. Although it's not available, there's an outline online, so I'm going to see if I can. I'd like to ask some questions around what I gained, or at least was able to extract. So one of the 10 items, I have a few here. One of them is you mention using the Plato's cave allegory, where there's a risk related to, presumably to AI, large language models, where we mistake shadows with reality. Could you say a little bit more about how?
I will do my very best to say just a little. But yes, That's an old philosophical problem as well. Is reality what we think reality is? And Plato has this allegory that what if we are like prisoners in a cave, only seeing the shadows of what passes by outside? What if one day we, the humans, found that we are actually in a cave, and if we walked out the cage, the world would look completely different from what we think it does? By way of science and technology, we've actually come a bit of the way out of the cave. But what struck me was that now we spend an increasing amount of our daily time on screen, on our computers and on our mobile devices and on screens in general. And that is a world that very few of us know very much about. I mean, ask a teenager what goes on when you Google something and you click on a picture and it pops on your screen. What happens there? And I think less than 1% would be able to describe adequately what goes on. And if you look at your computer screen and you take a file with your mouse and you drag it into the wastebasket, what goes on there? Is that a file being dragged into a wastebasket? No, it isn't. That is sort of like a visual metaphor for a lot of very advanced computer code being moved around. So my idea about this is that we're sort of crawling back into Plato's cave the more of our time we spend on screens, because we simply know as little about what goes on these screens as we knew about the world when we thought it was flat.
So I'll challenge you on that one a little bit and say, well, so what? Does it actually, as long as what we're doing on that screen when we open up Google and we're Googling something, as long as that kind of matches our perhaps fantasy version of it being a wizard that has insights, omniscience even on the world.
I get your point, and I mean there's tons of good entertainment opportunities in this technology, and I'm not against technology. I'm not against AI. I'm just for thinking about using it in manners that make us better persons, better people. But to your question, no, you're right. A lot of the time it doesn't really matter. But the internet and the online life, that's also where we get a lot of our knowledge about the world. And on the screen, and especially with generative AI, there are no logical boundaries of what you can create. And what I was afraid, I actually wrote this as one of the first articles I wrote about AI, I think maybe 8 years ago or something, or 6 years, many years ago, pretty in this context, many years ago at least. But now you see that this is starting to happen because we have so many deep fakes. It's a big issue on X right now, right, with the grok manipulations of people in bikinis that didn't want to be there, etc. So the world on the screen is really changing, and it's no longer easy to see what is an illusion and what is representing something real. And then some say, well, what's happening on your screen is not like illusionary just because it's digital. No, that's true. Something digital can be real as well. But very often what we see on a screen is trying to represent something physically real. And we can't tell the difference between when it is and when it's not anymore. So in that sense, we are becoming very easy victims of manipulations, and we see that happening all the time. I mean, you can win elections in the world's biggest countries by means of this technology, and it is, being done. So it is a problem that we're crawling back into Plato's cave in that metaphorical sense of it. That is not exactly what Plato meant. Of course, he wouldn't have access to computers, and he probably had other ideas about his allegory too. But I mean, I think it's a useful metaphor for trying to explain what is going on now. That was a long explanation. I'm sorry,
no,
but it's kind of a long road from the beginning to where I try to end with this.
No, I think that's a good way of putting it, because it is an illusion. It's better to term it in that way, because I think that after long-term usage, especially for those younger that have grown up with it, I'm old enough that I remember a world without it, that they grew up with it where that is reality. It is simply, that is the way it is, and it's an expectation, and it's and the reality is what's on the screen, and perhaps that's what's messing some minds up, especially the influencer types, where their core identity, in a sense, is represented by what is seen of them online.
Yeah,
perhaps, and that could.
But that's a really good point, because there is something illusionary to it, no matter what. And what you see there, it also, you take it with you out into your life. I remember, I'm old. I like to read newspapers on paper, and when I was a kid, my parents had a paper with on the backside of the paper there was sort of a satirical. That was satirical, and when you read it, it was really funny, and it was sort of satirical about what happened in the news. And then when you read it, you would just laugh at it, and then if you turned the paper around and started from page 1 instead, then I remember started reading, and sometimes I would still be in the mindset of the satire. So I wrote the real news as if they were satire, because I thought I didn't really switch my mindset. And I thought about it that when you spend a lot of time online and on screen, there's a good chance that you'll sort of mix those two realities. But when the screen reality is so manipulative, it sort of kind of blows up. It gets very hard to navigate in, and that makes you an easier victim of people who wants to maybe affect what you think, what you mean, what you feel, and maybe they want your money too. Oftentimes they do.
At some point also, I think one of the 10 you distinguish, or one of the 10 points in the book, you distinguish verbalism, how machines can talk but not think, and that this leads to thoughtless humans, and maybe that relates to what we just talked about to some extent. But you have this.
That sort of brings us back into the learning, teaching, and learning agenda, right? Mm. Yeah, it's John Dewey, if you know the American pragmaticist, I think it's called. But he made a lot of things about learning. It's the man behind the learning by doing term, but he also has this term verbalism, and I found that useful in the large language model context. We came from that when you use a large language model to write something. Well, it can make for you if you are in the 9th grade and you has to do a task or write something about the conflict in Palestine or whatever, a hard topic, well, then you can make a large language model, write something about that is very precise. You can maybe even make it take the perspective of a refugee and write about that. So you could deliver a product that would seem very, very real, But if it's not based on learned experience, and if it's not based on, a sort of deeper dive into what is this about and what is this perspective really, it becomes, instead of thinking, it becomes verbalism. There's a lot of words, but what do they really mean? And a large language model makes students able to do that, produce a lot of verbalism. But what is it really? Is it thinking? And I think, no, you can't call that thinking. Thinking is something else.
Are you talking about the thinking of the student, or the thinking that one presumes to be existing somehow in the text? That there's an effort behind that thing written?
Yes, good question. I see it because if you take like a paper that a student writes, that becomes a tool of showing what you have been thinking. That becomes sort of what you deliver to show that there has been thinking going on here, and now I transport that thinking over to you via this paper. And what I mean is that if you're in a learning context, it should represent your thinking. So the question is it your thinking if the chatbot has been doing a lot of it? And that I know it's not like just black and white. You can mix these things, but I would say that oftentimes you are cheating yourself into thinking that you are doing better than you really are. And if I may put a little note to that, because I read a new study just the other day from the main writer is called Daniela Fernandez, and there's co-writers on this project too, but it's rather large, and they tested what they call metacognition, like thinking about thinking. So if you use, you know it from this, what is it called? It's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. Do you know that? Like when the lower performers would think that they perform better, the higher performers would think that they perform lower. That's the Dunning-Kruger effect. When you use AI, generative AI, in your problem solving in a student context, the Dunning-Kruger effect disappears and everybody thinks that they perform higher than they really do. Was that too abstract?
No, that's
okay.
Scary.
But and a funny thing about it is that the more AI literacy the students have, the more they overestimate the performance of the task they did with AI. So the bottom line is that, well, this is from an admission test from law school. So they were able to see the ground level. How do normal people normally perform in this text without a chatbot, and then compare that to people using a chatbot when doing the test. And that way they could see that, okay, the level actually got a little bit higher. So they performed a little bit better. But their metacognition, their thinking about their thinking, well, that just blew up because they still had these inflated ideas about how good results they delivered. So their critical thinking about their thinking lessens when they use a chatbot, which seems to be, well, not very smart, right? Because
dangerous.
Dangerous in some way because it gives you a wrong idea about what do you really produce with this machine. And like when I said before, that is this really thinking that you take from your head onto a Word document or whatever and give it to somebody? Is it thinking that you deliver? And I think that this study shows that no, not really, because you're not even able to call it that this may not be as good as you thought it was. I think that's, I mean, I don't want to be like a ludity and say that now everything is gone and everything is ruined, but when I point to things with AI, I like to point to things like these because I also think that we can use AI to elevate, to enhance our thinking, but not if we use it as a production tool. We have to use it specifically as a learning tool, and I think if it's used correctly, it's very good at that, but it oftentimes is not used in that way. It's used as a production tool and able to give you better grades or whatever.
Okay. Yeah, to me, that is still frightening. I've met lots of professionals I met some professionals who had a self-assessment confidence that was in excess of perhaps where they should be, maybe more reflective of themselves.
Yeah.
And also in medicine, for example, that becomes extremely dangerous.
If you take it into fields like that, I'm from the humanities. There's this old joke that mathematicians, what do they need? They need a pen and a paper and a wastebasket. I'm a philosopher. I only need a pen and a paper. but in medicine, like you say, the consequences are bigger than a bad argument in philosophy. Yeah. So yes, I agree with, and we have to be very careful. And I would presume that by far most researchers are very careful, but we are sort of growing this up from the primary school through high school and making it enter the world of higher education, and there's really some things that we should be very aware of in that process, which is a year-long process, right? It started 3 years ago.
So let me move on here. I have a question here also, again, based on one of the 10 items that you mentioned. Maybe you could just explain what it is. It's the contrast between an inner owl and a hummingbird.
Oh, yes. That is inspired by two American psychiatrists from the book they issued called The Good Life. I don't know if you know that, but it's based on, I think, the world's largest happiness study. And they have this beautiful picture of how the human brain works, and they say that the human brain is like an owl brain. And an owl, well, it feeds itself by being able to focus. It can focus on a mouse in the snow from a 50-meter distance and then down and catch that owl. That's also the way the human brain works. We can focus and we can concentrate. And I would assume that most of the big achievements humanity have made is due to this ability to concentrate. Then they take, on the other hand, a hummingbird. A hummingbird feeds itself by digging into 1,000 flowers every day, sucking out nectar. And then they say that in a world of social media and heavy screen use, we treat our brains as if they were hummingbird brains instead of the owl brains that they really are, because we feed them with so many different inputs, shifting inputs all the time, that we treat it in a way that it's not made for being treated, our brains. And what does it do? Well, it makes us being worse at concentrating, and it makes us tired because it's not made for that cognitive task. And it also actually makes us less happy. That's part of why it's in this book called The Good Life. So that's the point about it. So TikTok, as I write in my book, is just a perfect owl to hummingbird converter, and we should be careful when using that, especially if we have it right next to the book that we're supposed to be reading.
Right. That's a good. I don't know if that's an allegory or what it is, but that's a good way of describing.
Yeah, it's kind of sort of a metaphor, right? I fell in love with it when I read it the first time. I've been using it often in lectures and in my book also.
I think maybe we'll maybe go to the last one here, which is no, I have two things actually. Okay, so one of them is, and I think this is how you maybe end your book, is that you see philosophy as a shield against technological burnout.
Yeah.
In a sense, that's what the whole book's purpose perhaps is, to be part of a delivery of that.
Yeah, well, you could see it as sort of as an awareness project, this book. And I think the awareness about various pitfalls of technology and also about various possibilities of technology is important. But then I sort of ended on a positive note, being inspired very much by the German sociologist and philosopher Hartmut Rosa, if you know him. He wrote a very thin book called, well, in Danish it's called, well, it's something else in German, but it's called The Uncontrollable. And then he also has a book about acceleration of human life, and it's inspired by those two books. Some people think that now we get new technology and that would give us more time on our hands because technology can sort of do stuff for us. But the point of Hartmut Rosa is that is not the way technology works. Technology works because it can help us be better competitors. We are always in a competition with each other, and then we take technology to improve that competition. That makes us drive faster and run faster and do everything faster. But everybody does it, so the speed just increases. When we got the email, and that was really, really smart automation of the snail mail, right? So you could have thought that, okay, well now we got a lot of time on our hands because the mailing, that's just over and done with in seconds. But what happened was not that we got a lot of time on our hands, it was that we just emailed like crazy, spent 1/3 of our working days on emailing. That's insane. And that shows us a pattern of how we adopt technology. We doesn't use it to get stuff done and then move on to something else. What becomes easier with technology, we just do more of. This is sort of a paraphrasing of Hartmut Rose. I'm not sure he would agree on everything about that. But the point is that it makes society speed up. We have many things to look at on our phones, and the number of stuff just increases and increases, and our lives gets busier and busier. There's more and more movement on the earth. And what Hartmut Rose says is, well, we cannot try to slow this down. It's probably not possible just to stop technology. But what we can do is try to acknowledge that where do we really get our best experiences? And he says that he has a concept of resonance, and he says that's something about being in the world in a certain way and trying not to force your experiences onto you, but just relax, go out into nature, see what happens, and then you will resonate with nature. Go to a concert and you will resonate with the artist on stage. Sort of try to seek out experiences where you resonate with the world instead of competing all the time. This is very simply put. There's a lot to say about it, but when I try to say that philosophy can save us, it is some of these small things that say, well, you could actually do this instead of this. The phone will never give you an experience of resonance. Walking a small trip around the block with your friend, well, it will, but you're never able to get an experience of resonance if you have a phone in your hand constantly, or when you're constantly occupied by your screen or by just doing stuff at a rapid speed. You need to sort of slow down and just be here now. It's almost Buddhistic. Again, I'm not sure that Hartmut Rose would agree on that point, but to me it looks like something like that. Oasis sang it too. It's an old point. Be here now and see what happens instead of being so busy all the time. Yeah. I think I put that better in my book. Maybe it sounds a little bit confusing.
I think I see that, and I think I was listening to somebody the other day on a podcast say that every year they make it a point to write letters, like physical letters, to people.
Yeah.
And although they're busy in their tech world, whatever it is, they actually take that time to do that. And I imagine that that's actually a resonating, kind of to use your jumping from regular mail, snail mail to email,
right.
That activity, and he's not doing it as a request for something or anything, but he's just doing it he sends thank you notes to people.
I think it's an excellent point, and there's an additional point to it is that the value that the receiver gets from this letter, that is also a value that comes from the person you're talking about having put an effort into it. He spent his time and he spent his attention on doing this. So this letter is transporting time and attention over to the receiver, which would never be the same in an email. That's also why these automated responses to text messages, automated birthday notes on Facebook that are already been written, it's completely useless. You would just automate the whole thing, and then I would automatically get 500 happy birthday messages on my birthday. But if nobody spent time and attention on this, it would be completely useless. I could as well just look out the window. So that's just an additional point to this, that automation can do a lot of good stuff for us, but in the context of being together and having a good life, it's very limited. We should be very aware of what do we really want to automate.
I'll just throw one in as kind of a personal experience with AI and what you think about it. I was trying to set up some software at home, and I had some difficulties with it. I contact their support, and it's one of those chat things. You know how they filter you out. They try to filter you out by giving you a chat, and it's really just searching. It always feels like it's just searching for their database of previous issues and then giving you something that's usually 80% of the time doesn't work, and you need to go to a live person. This one was different. So this one was built on more recent AI, and at every point at which I was where I was messing things up, I said, didn't do what you said. It did this instead. It gave me a beautiful answer to my particular context and said, okay, well, then you should be able to do these 5 steps. And again, I might stumble on step number 2, and then it gives me another 5 steps.
Yeah.
And it kept, I know it wasn't. The only reason I actually knew it was an AI is because it could type so quickly.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I wouldn't necessarily have known that it wasn't a person. It was, a real human on the other side. So what do you say to that?
Well, I think I use that myself. Oftentimes I have the experience that it doesn't work like you do, but a few times I have an experience that, wow, this just really works. My accounting program, I have my own company. My accounting program has an excellent AI. And in the beginning, I thought it was annoying that they sort of turned down their human presence in favor of this AI. But now I prefer the AI because it's just really, really good. So, I mean, that's really hard to argue with. We are losing something here, I think. And we can discuss whether that's okay. And oftentimes I think, well, okay, fair enough. Maybe that is okay. But if you look back on your day and say, okay, how was my day? What did I have of good experiences? It is more likely that if you had a small chat with a person helping you out in a store, that would rank very much higher than the chat you had with AI on your computer. Because, and that has been studied rather thoroughly as well, because these small meetings in everyday life, even though we don't even notice them, they make us feel belonging, and they make us just feel better. They make us more happy. A study was carried out outside a coffee shop, and then they divided people in 2. Some just had to go in, get a coffee, out again, a takeaway coffee, and the other part of this group was instructed to have a small conversation with the person at the counter. And it was just a clear cut that those people who had this small conversation, they felt far more connected, and they had a better day. There's many studies what do you say? Backs this up.
Oh, okay.
So when we automate stuff, we take out human contact, and we should be aware that we are also losing something when we do that. So it's a trade-off, and that's not to say that the AI shouldn't win here and then, here and now, there and. Yeah, here and there. Thanks, but it's just to say that okay, we should be aware that nothing is free. Something is going away when we put technology instead of people. So that's just a reflection that I would like us to have, because loneliness and just unhappiness is an increasing problem, and we often. Put the guilt on the screen and all that stuff, and that's maybe true that social media has made people more lonely and blah blah blah. But this taking away human interaction out in the physical life, maybe that plays a part too. Mm-hmm. I don't know. That's a big question, but I think you should look at that as well.
Okay, very good.
But back to your idea. I mean, great, and I enjoy that. I enjoy that as well. It's nice to get stuff done. Just.
Yeah. No, I see the balancing here, and also that you're not coming from a Luddite, I think you referenced it earlier, Luddite perspective of just...
No, I hope you wouldn't think that. I don't think so. Sometimes, but yeah.
No, not at all, not at all. No, this has been really enlightening, actually, and I had quite a few surprises here also. Very interesting. I'm going to go out and get your book tomorrow.
All right, great.
And I hope the listeners will as well. So thank you very much, Thomas, for being on here. And thank you.
Thanks, a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to The Future of Learning. I'm your host, Don McFarlane. A big thank you to Lasse Hansen from instantspeak.dk for recording and mixing the audio and for providing the studio here in Valby. Thanks to Carsten Seidel for video production and editing, and Nikolai Elbeck for our graphical identity. Martin Schulz is our executive producer. The podcast is brought to you by Transmission, a professional education company with a focus on AI and emerging technologies. Transmission works with HR and learning and development leaders to drive AI literacy and build practical AI capabilities across organizations. To learn more, please visit transmission.dk/podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a rating wherever you listen to your podcasts and feel free to share it with your network. Thanks again for listening. We look forward to welcoming you back another time.